calling her a foreigner is unfair. She herself said she is Italian by birth and Indian by karma. But the fact is that she, I think, realized that this entire issue would be an unfortunate distraction from her own effectiveness in leading the government. She is an enigma only to the extent that there are so many paradoxes to her life and background. That is, that she's come from a different country and become the leader of this country. She has led the largest party in India for the longest time, the oldest political party in India for the longest time, and she has also managed to do a lot of things that no one would have expected somebody from her background and position to do. I first met her, in fact, when I was at the United Nations, and she was on a visit to the US, and I was invited by a senior Congress MP to a dinner with her. It was very informal. She was not in power at the time, didn't have any official position. It was after she'd just taken over the party and was getting to know the world from that perspective. And it was a most enjoyable evening and dinner conversation. Of course, it's a very different relationship when you're working in the party than when you're an outsider that she's meeting. But I certainly enjoyed that meeting, and subsequently she invited me to address a conference that the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation was conducting. And this is when she was, again, out of government, but very concerned about the problems and the prospects facing the country. I mean, there were things, for example, that she would say about what was happening in Indian politics, which were not what was in the media, not what was being attributed to the Congress Party's official thinking, but invariably it was her insight, what she told me privately, that turned out to be correct, rather than what the media was reporting of the Congress Party's view and stand. Well, I think in many ways, for somebody who many attacked as being a symbol of privilege in this country, to instead become a symbol of renunciation was quite an extraordinary thing. And I think it really was a wonderful gesture to make, partly because, as you may recall, when the UPA MPs got together and elected her to be Prime Minister, there was immediately a backlash from a number of people. The famous episode of Sushma Swaraj threatening to shave her head bald and go on a dharna outside Parliament House. Many others saying that, in a country of 1 billion Indians, we couldn't find anyone but a foreigner to lead us, and all of this kind of talk. And rather than constantly be sort of heckled or attacked for something she could do nothing about, she couldn't change where she was born and what background she came from, she probably said, better to step aside, have somebody who I will work in close cooperation with. And I think it was the right decision. With hindsight, it was a stunning decision at the time that it happened. Many were shocked and surprised. There were people saying, we didn't vote for Manmohan Singh, we voted for Sonia Gandhi. But they got Sonia Gandhi's active involvement, and at the same time they got a very competent senior elder statesman Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh. I think there was a diarchy functioning where Mrs. Gandhi ran the party and Manmohan Singh ji ran the government. And I don't think that there was much interference from the party to the government, other than to lay out the party stand or the party view on certain issues. In turn, the government was left to run itself. It was not supposed to interfere in the political functioning of the party. I know, for example, that the decision to abstain, to vote against Iran rather than abstain on the International Atomic Energy Agency vote that began the problems for Iran about their nuclear ambitions, that decision was not the party's preference, it was the government's decision. Similarly, there's no question that whenever it came to economic policy and when it came to targeting the growth rate, what fiscal deficit to have and so on, It was the ministers responsible that made the decisions. It was never the party trying to say do this and not do that. She's quite relaxed and informal when she wants to be, and she's quite formal and correct when she wants to be. A person in her position obviously attracts an awful lot of people who want her attention, who come to her, etc. Amongst the people she knows in the party, she can be very friendly. Amongst those who are strangers whom she is meeting, she can be polite but somewhat distant. Now, there are people in the Congress party who are economically a little more to the right of her. That doesn't mean they can't get along. And nor does it mean that Sonia Gandhi as an individual will have to swallow her beliefs. She will take the stand she takes. She will in the end come to the adjustment she needs to come to with the government. But the government will go on. Mrs. Gandhi's flaws, I think the biggest flaw I would see is that she was a bit reluctant to engage with the media. That changed only towards the end, but certainly initially her reticence was often misunderstood as distance or aloofness, whereas it was simply that she felt it was not appropriate for her to be in the public media, particularly at a time when we were in government, and it was the job of the government to speak for itself. So as a result, I think she allowed some narratives, including narratives about her, to be set by others.